Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this is a repertoire exploration episode. These episodes come from my deepest, darkest desires to find new music. I know you're like that too, because you're listening to this episode. There's so much new music out there. There's so much old music out there. There's just so much music out there. How do we find it all? Well, one way is by sitting down with live composers and going through some of their pre-selected repertoire. Today, you meet Kansas City, Missouri composer, Mr. Ryan Main. Ryan is incredible. He has a church job, he's an educator, he has a youth choir, he does kiddos, and if you haven't seen his presentation on all the amazing things you can do in rehearsal kinesthetically to get kids involved, don't worry, I'll get him back on the podcast for that. But let's talk about his music. Ryan writes music for all different age groups, all different areas. In this conversation, we talk about how he approaches music, how he does his sketches, how he works collaborations and commissions, and it's a great conversation. You get to hear some of his music in the middle too. Anyway, I really am so thrilled that you are listening today. The episode is brought to you by our sponsor, the Kennison Choral Company. They have a repertoire calculator that can help you find time to do all the music. They also have the most bomb tracks, not just here, memorize your part, but actual helpful tracks so you can empower your singers to learn and internalize the music so that gives you more time to unpack the lyrics. You'll see why that's really important in just a second. Without further ado, my friend, composer, educator, awesome person, Ryan Main. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and today we have a composer and an educator in our presence. Hello, Ryan Main.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a while since I've done a repertoire exploration episode, and you've graciously sent us 5 of your gorgeous compositions. So tell the listener, who is Ryan Main?
That's a question that I would love to answer. So I am a composer, I'm a choir director, I'm a former teacher, and I am still a little bit of all of those things. I direct the youth chorus of Kansas City, which is a nonprofit that I founded 4 years ago. And all of those things, I think, kind of inform the other. So as a teacher, I actually wrote my first choir piece for my students. Before that, I was mostly writing for band and for orchestra. But I found myself in a situation where I was teaching middle school band, choir, orchestra, and guitar. And I needed
that one in there for fun.
Yeah. And that was a real challenge. I was about 1 week ahead of my students in the book every week in guitar. But I had this great passion for choir. I'd had a wonderful choir experience in my undergrad. And so I found my way as a choir director and eventually found that that's really where my talents lie as a teacher and as a director and really as a composer as well. I think I've really found my niche in writing for choir, and it's something that I really love to do.
So were you an orchestra band guy growing up?
I was mostly a band guy, yeah. I played the trumpet, just like my dad. I played my dad's trumpet, actually, cool. Starting in 6th grade. And I was the most passionate 4th or 5th chair trumpet player that you could possibly have in your high school band. It just, I didn't really find a thing in music that I had that both talent and passion for until I sat down at a piano for the first time at 18 years old. I took a music theory class in high school, and I remember the moment I sat down to figure out where middle C was and start checking my work. And the next thing I knew, within a week, I was playing the piano for 5-6 hours a day. Cool. And my technique, that first year, I'm sure was terrible. I call it the bear claw hand with my left. But I kept at it, and within 2 years, I was majoring in music composition in my undergrad, and here I am now.
You found your niche. I love that. I think right in and of itself, you started us off with a nugget of wisdom. Keep trying until you find your place and be passionate, even if you're fourth or fifth chair. I was going to guess trumpet, not gonna lie. I also played in band. Do you want to take a guesstimate at my instrument? It wouldn't offend me in any way.
I'm going to say saxophone.
That's a great guess because it almost was, but oboe.
Oboe.
Yeah, there's like
Okay.
only one of you. You get to be the middle. You sit between the flutes and the clarinets. All the things I love about life.
I think it's a very underrated instrument too.
Totally. I still have it, actually. I can
Do you
play,
really?
but I'm dramatically out of tune. My chops are horrible.
I will send you an oboe solo I wrote in my undergrad.
Yes, I will play through that.
We'll see if it still holds up.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I switched to voice because people. I needed to be around people.
Yeah.
And the practice room solo was not working for me. And I could practice voice in a room with lots of my friends at the same time. And we were all a hot mess. Okay, so you get into composition. You started with the band orchestra world, moved into choir because you had a choir. And now are you writing for your youth choir now?
Quite a bit, yeah. Commissions keep me really busy. I've had such a winding path. I sometimes have to reflect to remember exactly how things went. But the truth is that I just love to create, and that really is across platforms and across art forms too. It just happens to be that creating music is the thing that I'm the best at, I think. And I think I know that about myself well enough to know that this is what I need to be spending my time on. But when I have a free moment to create a graphic for my youth choir for our front page of our website, I love that too. I love creating something from nothing or moving things around and making things different. Arranging music is just as fun as composing. But there is something really special to me about sitting down at a piano, either with a poem or with nothing, and generating something that did not exist before. And to follow that through, that there could be an idea in my head that I'm walking around with in the morning, and by the evening, I've put something on paper that I can send to someone else in another part of the world, and they will be singing that thing that was in my head. And that the magic of that is, I think, never going to be lost on me. I'm so lucky to be able to do it. And it continues to excite me every time I get to step into a classroom with a choir that's performing my music. It's my very favorite thing to do, to get to work with kids who are singing and learning and internalizing music that it was here and it was here. And
right, in your
now
brain
it's in the
and
world.
in your hands.
Yeah.
I love how you've given us a little sneak peek into your compositional process. Sometimes it's an idea, sometimes it's a poem. Tell us a little bit about how would you describe your sound, and how do you approach commissions differently than just starting a piece from scratch on your own?
Well, that's a great question. And when we get into the literature, we'll see a little bit of the difference, because one of these pieces we're going to talk about is one that I wrote specifically for a group that I'm going to be directing. But my process as a choral composer is I've tried a lot of different things, and what I've found that really works best for me, that I also think just ends up with the most authentic art, is that I take the poem that I've chosen to work with, or that I've collaborated with a choir director, that we are going to set this poem to music, and we're going to bring our joint vision to life. That what I do is I print the poem out on double-spaced or triple-spaced paper, so that I've got lots of room to write annotations, and not staff paper, just regular white paper. I put it on my piano and I leave it there for at least 2 weeks, and I just sit down as often as I have the time to do, and in the beginning process, at least an hour a day, and I just create. I will annotate in Roman numerals, in solfege, in numbers. Sometimes I just write out phrases. This building here, dying here, whatever it is. That becomes my sketch. And I was always enamored with the idea of sketching, but if you're familiar with, for example, how Eric Whitacre sketches, he creates these beautiful artistic sketches, and to me that wouldn't really mean anything. What I need is to live with the poetry for a while, to see how it informs the music, and more than that, what sound world it's creating. Because I think at the core of who I am as a composer, I think there's a piece of film scoring there. That is the music that I grew up with. I love creating sound worlds, and I love then creating a variety of sound worlds that fit each poem. And it's something that I really value as a composer, is having a little bit of a chameleon sound, something that you could listen to two of my pieces and not necessarily know that I had written both of those. That to me is really interesting, because I think that is being the most true to two poems that are very different.
I love that. I love how you've merged what you said, your passion of creating art. You're creating visual, you take a visual, you create a space. We'll have to talk about film scoring eventually, because I teach a film score class, which is so much fun to teach, the history of film score. But my choir premiered some pieces a few years back that were Christmas pieces written by the film score composer professor at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. So we'll have to chat about that another time. That's a whole nother really cool can of worms to open.
I would love that. And please send me those recordings if you can. I'd love to hear those.
Yeah, I'll find them. It's really fun to see what happens when film score and choir combine. I think we see that in stuff like Frozen, and again, a whole nother conversation. But let's talk specifically about some of your music. Before we look at it, do you write for a specific, you say you have a youth choir, do you write for a specific age graphic, or do you have something for everybody?
I think definitely the latter. And for me, that's informed by the same philosophy that I like to go where the poetry leads me, where I think it's very possible that a director of a two-part children's choir could give me a poem, and I could tell them, I don't think that this would work for two-part. This just truly needs to be 8-part DVC choir, or vice versa. But that's part of the process of the commission, is working together to find the right fit in every step of the process.
I love how you're bringing a collaborator spirit to the composition process. I feel so often we try to perform a piece of music, and composers, especially today with Zoom, are so often open to help us interpret and to help talk us through what they created. But I love how from the very beginning of a piece, you're talking about collaborating. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, and I really do love that. When I am writing for a choir, I'm not just writing for that director who I'm talking to over email. I'm trying to get to understand who they are and who their kids are, what that program is, and what is going to really speak to those students. And something else, an added layer of this, is that I really love more and more in my career, commissioning living poets and working with living poets who represent an absolutely broad range of our population. I love getting to bring these different voices into the world through music. So I think collaboration is hard. There's a challenge in that, but to me, that's part of the fun.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm dying to dig into these pieces. I've listened to all of them. I've looked through all of them. I sang through all of them because it was fun. We're
Can,
gonna start. Yes, go for it.
can I just say, when you said you were going to sing through them, I sent you the music and you said, I'm going to sing through these. I just smiled. I love that because I think that's something I do literally every time I pick literature, every time I write a piece, I finish by singing through to make sure that it speaks. And I love that. When you said that, I thought this is going to be a great conversation.
Oh, I was. It was fun to see the singable moments. That's a question I ask my singers all the time when we select repertoire, because there's a big collaborative process in my choirs with selecting repertoire, kind of like picking your wedding china, where you go in and you say, here are 4 of my favorite patterns. Which one do you like, honey? So you've narrowed it down. Same for
Yeah.
my choir. But I think singability is always what they go back to. They'll love the words, they'll love the way it sounds, but the way it feels, like mouth feel, vocal
Yeah.
feel. And so there's a lot of good moments in this. I had fun singing through this. Let's start with a piece called A Part of Us. You said this is probably your most accessible piece. Tell us about the poem and when you wrote it and all that stuff.
Yeah, so this commission was finished just before the pandemic started. So this is one of the pieces that we'll talk about today where the premiere's been delayed up to a year. But this was a group for a community choir in Missouri called St. Joseph Community Chorus. And it's this poem just, I think when you read it, it has so much heart and so much intimacy from the beginning. I'll just read the first stanza. I love to sing among your smiling faces, a mother's voice, a lullaby, where we are us and you and I. And I think that's kind of a dream to set something like that as a composer. And so when I sat down at the piano, what I found myself migrating to was something that feels a bit like an Irish farewell. That this is there is a solemnity in some of this. The poem goes on to talk about losing a part of us. And this was written for their founding director who had passed away. And I think that that's a really universal experience. And that's part of why I think that this is so accessible, because it's not just singable, but it's also something that so many of us can connect with. And I think that singers will find just some real music therapy in singing this, I think. As a composer, what I wanted to create here was something that was fun to sing, that feels like a warm hug, and that is really accessible on a first read too. And I think that this piece is kind of all of those.
So I'm going to play a little clip for the listeners here in a second. But what I loved when I was singing through it was I was expecting, after reading the poetry, that this was going to be slow, solemn, especially hearing you talk about the fact it was for loss. But it really is quite spirited, and it feels like such a release as you're singing it. So I'm going to play this little Irish jig that is such a joy to sing. So as you heard, that is such a very Irish reminiscent sound and so fun to sing. This is a 4-part SATB. It's a
Correct.
lot of unison moments, and if it's not unison, it's in the triad. Very accessible. I'm pretty sure I'm going to program this for my adult choir. Just heads up on the FYI. I loved singing it.
Fantastic. And I should also add, I do this for a lot of my music, but this one has several voicings also.
Okay.
So this one's available in SSAB, SAB, SSA 2-part as well. So
And when you
um,
do that, do you like change? Do you flip the parts? How do you do that when you're rewriting it?
that's a great question. I tend to start with the same thematic material, but I move things around a lot, and it's the same process as composing, where I sing through every part and I make sure that it feels idiomatic to each of those voicings. And if I can't make it so, then I don't publish that voicing. But I've always loved the idea of the same material working in different mediums. I don't know if you've ever heard a trombone choir perform.
I've been
Um,
to a trombone choir performance before. Thank you, undergrad.
hey, fantastic! I
Hey.
I actually love hearing choir music transposed is
Transcribed.
not you transcribed. Thank you for trombone choir because it is the closest to the human voice out of all of the
I
instruments.
never thought of that. Yeah, I went to a couple trombone choir things back freshman, sophomore year undergrad. Hey, thanks for the memory. I forgot about that. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's the same philosophy for me that if it can work for another voicing, then I think it just makes it more accessible across the spectrum of choir.
if someone has an adult choir and a youth choir or whatever, are your different voicings, are they mashable? Can they do them all at the same time?
Yes, yeah, I that is something that I take into account every time I do a revoicing. Absolutely.
Very, very helpful. All right, so selection number 2. This was actually an editor's choice selection here recently, and you said it has a really powerful backstory. Can you tell us about Be Who You Are?
Yeah, well, this is powerful backstory for me on so many levels because first off, my fiance wrote the text of this piece.
So cool.
Yeah, so she is also the commissioning director, and she had this moment where she was just reflecting on the joy and the energy and the love that her students bring into the building every single day. She greets her students at the front door of the building every morning, and just she describes it as a tidal wave of hugs and joy coming her way every morning. And so one night, this poem just came out of nowhere. She'd never written a poem before, and this was it. Um,
Cool.
I know, yeah. Um, just a little bit of the poem. It starts out, you are love, exuberant love. You are life, unstoppable life. Loud stomping feet, eyes glitter and shine. Your arms and your heart to the world open wide. And I love that. I wrote this piece for her students who were getting ready to perform at the Kansas Music Educators Association conference in 2020. And as they were preparing this piece, one of her former students, Tommy Ruff, passed away, and it was really a very tragic loss for the community. And so Bethany and we reached out to Tommy's mother and asked if this piece could be dedicated to his spirit and his memory. And so part of the proceeds of this piece, every sale, a part of that goes to the Band of Angels Foundation that
Beautiful.
that Glinda and Bethany and I decided to share this with. And
I love that.
yeah, that was something that is a way to keep Tommy alive. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful. Well, so this is a 2-part piece. It's also upbeat. What I love about it is it's 2-part, but it's not 2-part the whole time. So you start in unison, which all the research says is the best for building that
Mm,
gorgeous tone. but you give them like accent markings and complicated rhythms, and you change between 6/8 and 4/4. You're getting them to count. Like, it's so many teachable moments in this piece.
Yeah, and you are like right inside the mind of the composer. This is so fun.
Cool.
Never
gonna be a composer, don't worry. I just really love looking at the music and talking to y'all.
But yeah, these are the exact things that I'm thinking is, okay, so the music, the meter of the text changes here. That could have stayed, that 6/8 bar could have stayed 4/4. I think a lot of people might tell you, well, we can't do meter changes in elementary choir. That's too difficult to read. That's exactly right. They can. Kids absolutely can. It takes just one lesson on that, and it's absolutely worth it.
And then lots of repetition.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, it's so everything is filtered through that lens of both, is this achievable, and also is it worth it? It musically, is the trade-off worth it? And there are lots of those moments here where the rhythms are syncopated. The harmonies can be really tight sometimes, but it's like you said, there's so many moments that start unison and split off. I think it's very doable by even a very novice group.
I sent this one over to a friend of mine who has a 3rd grade choir at a performing arts school here in town, and I hope so much so that they pick it for their choir. But if not, I'm going to choose it for my kiddos. But I'm giving him first dibs because he has a dynamite, ginormous 3rd grade choir, and I just feel like this would be the perfect piece for them. The syncopations are great because they are set off by evens, and I think when you're learning, having that codai of like this versus that, or the Gordon approach, like it's not this, it's not that. So there's lots of teachable moments in this one as well. And I love the story that your future wife wrote the words. How cool. Anything else you want to say about Be Who You Are?
Just that I think the message matters, that being who you are is something that it's important not just for kids, it's important for you and me to remember that too. Who I am is something that, it's really important to never apologize for that. And that's my favorite line in this entire poem. It's right at the very end: never be sorry to be who you are. I think that really matters.
So what I'll do is I'll snick that in right here. So let me push pause and we will go listen to that right now. You are love, you are life, you are laughter, you are light. The world needs your light, this place needs your song. Never be sorry to never be sorry to never be sorry. So that was fun. I love that piece. Definitely full of energy and a lot of great moments. Let's look at number 3 on our list. This one is called Home. It's also really accessible, and there's some cool things you want to tell us about it. So tell us about Home.
Yeah, so this was really fun collaboration. This was commissioned by Tyler Busick, a Missouri choir director, and he had this concept and was supported by his administration in this idea of doing something that was a celebration of Missouri. Basically, he wanted to create what he came to me with is something that speaks to the landscape, something that speaks to the rolling hills. I just want to celebrate our state. And so we found a Missouri poet, and he commissioned me, a Missouri composer, and we created this piece together. And so Stephen Rue wrote this text that's just this wonderful winding journey that I think is really open to interpretation. And that's poetry that I love to work with as well, is that there's a lot of symbolism here. And when you talk to Stephen, some of the things he talks about in this poem are referencing places in his hometown. Oh, take me back to where the sunrise framed beyond the farthest shore. He's talking about a specific place where he grew up. But you know, for us, that might mean something different. And there's so much symbolism here in the journey of life and the journey beyond life as well. And so I think this piece, part of what I like about it is it's really universal. It's very applicable to so many different kinds of programs, but it also fills that gap a little bit of basically, musically speaking, this is American folk song, and
yes,
you know that there's still a place for that, I think, in our programming, and I think it's also very easy to wear out the available American folk songs, and to want more, and so that's part of why I think this piece is worth knowing about.
well, it makes so much sense now that you've told this story of it being from Kansas. When I read through the poem, the words that really stuck with me were the second stanza. And fly did I to sights beyond, to find my fame, my love and loss. I set my mind on new horizons, a future hazed at present cost. And I can't wait to unpack that with a choir. I feel like there are so many talkable, conversational, team building moments in this text. And again, the singability is gorgeous. I'm going to play what happens at letter F, which is that section you just talked about, that the poet, that's his place. And it's beautiful, framed by the furthest shore. So I'm going to push pause and play that little clip.
Perfect.
So one of our newest American folk tunes just come in there for you, Home. So that was the SATB version. What do you have this in a series of other voicings as well?
Yeah, same as A Part of Us, SAB, SSAB, which I think there's a real need for that voicing in particular. So if I can make that work, I always do. SSA and two parts.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right, we're totally switching gears. We're going from American folk tune to Inviniam Viam.
That's right. Yeah. So this piece is different than the rest that we're going to talk about today because this is one of the first in a long time that I've gotten to write for myself. This was commissioned. Cool. Yeah, by the North Carolina All-State Choir, and that's happening this fall. And so I was invited to be the director of that group, and they also asked me to write a piece for this event. And so I started digging around for a text that would be, that would speak to something that would excite me, something that speaks maybe to my journey a little bit, and this is what I found. So this is so much fun to talk about. And Vinion Viam translates as find a way, and it's from a longer quote by the Carthaginian general Hannibal, who is most well known for, during the Punic War against the Romans, marching across the Alps with elephants and taking the war to the Romans. something that was really both unprecedented and just absolutely unexpected. And so when he presented this idea to his lieutenants, they said, that's impossible. That's a terrible idea. We absolutely should not do that. And what he said back to them is, aut inveniam viam, aut faciam, which means I will either find a way or make one.
Oh, that's so good.
And I love that. And so I think there's so much there that speaks to me personally. You know, I think that's been my way as a director. When someone tells me no, then I just find another way to do what's best for my kids. When I was deciding how to try to make a career as a composer, the self-publishing pathways were not as well worn as they are now. So that was a really scary thing. And I remember having that moment of trying to decide, do I pursue the traditional publishing pathways, or do I blaze my own path? Do I create my own website? Do I figure out how to print music? All of the above. And what I came up with was Inveniam Viam. And so this is a this is a real labor of love for me, and I think it's something that our students a conversation that our students will love to have. What does this mean to you when someone says no? What do you do when someone says you can't do that? You're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. Hopefully no one's saying that to our students, but no. You know, what is the response? And so this is the result of this. The piece is fiery, it's intense. It does something that I love in music, which is to try to create a slingshot experience from beginning to end.
It really does, now that you say the slingshot, because I had 2 questions to ask you about the music, but you just answered it with the slingshot.
Did I?
Well, because I'm like, why are we, in the beginning, you open with the statement of inveniam, and you say it twice before you really elongate it, and both times it has a fermata over it with the stop, full stop. And so it's, I see that now, like you're pulling back the slingshot,
yes,
you're pulling it back farther, and then it goes.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. I love creating that anticipation and then just drive. Some of my favorite music to listen to is not 4 minutes of well-crafted highs and lows, but something that is just a dart throw, something that is a slingshot pull. You know, and 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. I think this piece is right at the 3-minute mark. So this is truly a concert opener, maybe a closer if you want to scare your audience on the way out.
Go find your path, people. Go find it. If I have time, I'll play the whole piece in our recording. But if I don't have time, what's your favorite part to sing?
Oh, gosh.
That's a tough one, I know, because I've been trying to pick it. Cause I come into these with knowing which part I want to play in the recording. But I want to know what your favorite part is.
I really love. So there's, we go from these long held out phrases while the piano is very, very active. And then we switch immediately. And this is, again, part of that, creating that energy shift where the piano arrives and the choir launches into intense rhythm. So right at letter J at the end, what you hear is the choir in homophonic chords. They're singing Adviam inveniam faciam Adviam inveniam, and it's all tight chords. It is intensity, I think.
That's really similar to the same part I picked, which was where the piano drops out suddenly right before letter E. It's been this build, and then all of a sudden the piano drops out, the choir gets a little bit more rhythmic, and then it just takes off, and it's so cool. I want to be an alto if I sing this piece.
Yeah.
Very awesome. Okay, I'm going to push stop and I'm going to play I'm going to see if I can make time for the whole thing. I completely see how that could be an opener or a closer, but I think there's a caveat. When does this premiere?
So this is going to premiere on November 7th. So if you're interested in this piece, check out my website. It's going to go right up on the 7th. It'll be on JW Pepper then as well.
Oh, cool. Oh, I really love this one. It is also fun to sing all the parts. But again, I want to be an alto if I ever am in a choir doing that one. I can't believe we're already at our last piece, Ryan. This has been so much fun. Tell me about 3 things. This one is a little bit unique, definitely unique. And you said it has an interesting backstory as well.
Yeah, so this was a commission with Blake Richter, who is also a Missouri choir director.
And a composer arranger, because I've performed a couple of his pieces.
Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic, and a really good friend too. I love Blake, and his group was selected to perform at the Missouri Music Educators Conference in January of 2020. And so he came to me with this poem that he had found on, I think it was poemhunter.com. I'm not sure if you've ever seen these websites where people upload their own poetry. And it's not necessarily easy to find the poets who have uploaded this poetry. It's not always a great source for composers, because if you can't find the poet who's uploaded this poetry, then you can't get the rights, and it sometimes is easier to just work with someone who you know and create something. But Blake found this poem and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I love this.
It's beautiful.
It is stunning, and it's so short. If you don't mind, I'd like to just share
Yes,
the poem."
please read it.
So the poem is, and each of these statements is a single line of the poem. Life is sacred, but not safe. One must trust, two must love, three must care. Though I'm young, I must say, my life will change soon someday. But till that day, I will do but three things. One must trust, two must love, three must care. So this was written, we found out, by Andrew Houston is his name, and Blake was actually able to do some Facebook sleuthing. He tracked down Andrew, who is now about our age, and he's working in Minnesota. He's not a choir director or poet. And he said, "Oh, I remember that poem. I wrote that when I was in high school. I wrote that for an English class, and I don't even remember uploading it to this website." But Blake reached out, said, "We have found this poem. It's beautiful. Can we use this? Can we work with this?" And Andrew said, "Sure." And so that never happens. That never happens.
Hey, y'all, do your homework in high school.
Yeah. And so I absolutely love this. That phrase, "though I'm young, I must say, my life will change soon someday." I think that's something that it will speak so much to our elementary and middle school singers, even our high school singers. This was specifically written for an intermediate choir, which was 5th and 6th grade. Mm-hmm. But you know, this is a text that I think is so universal. One must trust, two must love, three must care. That is the takeaway. And that is something that, as I was working with this, every time I get to talk about this piece again, I remember, oh yeah, three things. Mm-hmm. You must trust, love, and care. And if I can do those, I'm being successful in life. So this piece, what I wanted to do as a composer was to capture that spirit in music. And I think this piece is really unique because the poem is really unique. And what I came away with was the piano does a lot of work here, and the poetry is stretched really, I think, as far as you can, and that's done really intentionally. What I wanted to try to create was something that felt like a single line that was sometimes separated by up to two measures of silence in the singers. And there are specific moments, for example, here, rehearsal B, where there are these dashed lines. So there's a whole or a half note on the first beat and then a quarter note on the last beat, separated by a rest, and there's a dashed line between those. And so the phrase is, "One must trust." And I'm sorry, I didn't check my pitch before I started. That's probably the wrong key.
I don't have perfect pitch. If someone does, I'm clapping for you, and I'm so, so, so proud of you, but we don't, and that was great.
Thank you so much. So the intention here, though, is to not sing it as one rest, must trust, but rather to keep the air moving throughout. And I think that this is something that's so useful to teach singers. And so this really, I think, became, as I was writing it, both a piece that's very artistically satisfying to me, but also a very teachable piece because it's so easy to read. This is one of the most readable pieces I've ever written.
Very much.
Yeah. So the goal, what we want to teach our singers here at rehearsal B, is to keep the air moving through the rest. One must rise.
Look at
And I
that little
think,
nuance.
yeah,
Yes.
we can teach young singers that.
Oh, young singers deserve, young musicians, future choir rock stars of the world, they deserve to learn these type of things. I loved something a little bit different about this. I love how you explored the lower range of the voice, but in a way that's really healthy. So I solfeged this piece just for kicks and giggles because it was really fun to solfege it. And I love that you're giving us a place to work on these lower ranges, especially with my middle school girls who want to sound like all the pop stars today, who
Hmm.
sing exceptionally low. This gives us a way you always approach the low notes from the top down. So it's the perfect way to teach that technique of mixing and singing them
Yes.
healthy. So that was like, oh, I love this. We get to sing low notes, but safe.
Yes, that is exactly what I was thinking too. This is a piece that I'm approaching as a choir director as well. Always want my singers coming from head voice down rather than the other way around. Absolutely.
This is a great one. Ryan, all of this music, like I want to do all of them. That's the hardest part. I want to program all of them. I'm gonna have to find a way for all my choirs. We'll have like a Ryan Main set in our concert.
Love it. I will Zoom so many times with your choirs.
Oh my gosh, we'll have to eventually come down and visit. It would be so nice to have you.
I would love that.
Ugh.
Absolutely.
Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to give us this glimpse into the mind behind this amazing music that you're providing us in this world of choral excellence. Before we go, I always let the guest share one final thought. It's the Music Ed Matters podcast. So, what's one thing that really matters that you want the listener to walk away with from today, other than program his music?
Um, that's a great question. I think what matters is kids, and that we are the adult at the front of the room who is teaching and empowering and giving our students the tools um, that that enable them to do anything. And this might sound like a platitude, but it's something that I really believe. That music education matters not because we are teaching future musicians, but because we are teaching citizens of the world, and that music is a tool to create better humans, more empathetic, more loving, more critically thinking humans. So lean into it, trust that, and know that the extra time that you spend, the extra energy that you spend um, finding literature, creating great lessons, it's all worth it. It all matters, and you may not know it in the moment. It may take 20 years for you to see that in the world, but trust it.
I love it. The whole human. What are the three things? One must,
Trust,
two must,
2, love, and
three,
3 must care.
love, trust, and care. Oh, thank you so much for being here, Ryan. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope that in this episode you saw how much Ryan Main as a composer trusts, loves, and cares. I hope that you found some new music. You got motivated to look at stuff. I know this is the season of the year when we're looking at repertoire and making our plans for the year ahead, but I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you did too. Please know that you, my friend, you're amazing. I'm so thankful that you're listening. You matter. The repertoire you're picking matters. The singers and the people in front of you matter. We all know that music matters, especially those 5 songs you just listened to by Ryan Main. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.